Whenever we talk about social intelligence, many thinkers are seen to raise a common question. Do we need a global standard for measuring social intelligence? If yes, is it actually possible to find such global standard? This question appears to be legitimate, because, in the global standard, we meet thousands of cultures and thousands of different social norms. Hi, this is Dr. Rekha Kale, your Mind and Success mentor. We have spent more than a century trying to understand and measure human intelligence. We measure academic and cognitive abilities. We developed IQ tests. Later, psychologists began asking another important question. Is intellectual ability alone sufficient to understand how effectively any human being relates and stays with other human beings? This question gave birth to the scientific study of social intelligence. But today, after more than a century of discussion and research, I believe we need to ask an even bigger question. Have we done enough? The concept of social intelligence is not new. In 1920, psychologist Edward L. Thorndike explicitly divided intelligence into three broad areas: the ability to deal with ideas, the ability to deal with concrete objects, and the ability to deal with people. He described social intelligence as the ability to understand and manage people, and to behave wisely in human relationships. That was more than a century ago. Researchers subsequently tried to convert this idea into something measurable. One important early attempt was the George Washington Social Intelligence Test, developed in the 1920s. It attempted to assess abilities related to understanding and dealing with people. But the results exposed a fundamental problem. In a 1937 evaluation, Thorndike and colleagues reported that the test had relatively weak validity and correlated substantially with abstract intelligence. They suggested that future research should examine more realistic situational tests, including situations involving actual social behavior, says ResearchGate. And perhaps that is where the real difficulty begins. Because measuring whether somebody can solve a mathematical problem is relatively straightforward. But how do we measure whether somebody can understand another person's perspective, recognize the consequences of their behavior, resolve conflict without unnecessarily creating another conflict, cooperate with people who think differently, understand social norms without becoming blindly controlled by them, balance personal interests with collective interests, communicate without humiliating another person, disagree without creating hatred, take responsibility for the consequences of one's actions? These are much more complex abilities, and they are at the heart of social intelligence. The research did not stop. Psychologists continued approaching social intelligence from different directions. Researchers such as J.P. Guilford explored the structure of intelligence and encouraged the study of abilities beyond conventional academic intelligence. Later, psychologists such as Nancy Cantor and John Kilstrom approached social intelligence through knowledge of the social world and the ability to deal with the tasks and challenges of everyday social life. Their work emphasized that social intelligence cannot always be understood independently of the context in which a person is functioning. The subject, therefore, gradually moved beyond the simple question, "Can you understand people?" towards much richer questions. Can you understand a social situation? Can you understand what other people know, believe, or intend? Can you adapt your behavior appropriately? Can you achieve a social objective without unnecessarily damaging relationships? This brought social intelligence into contact with neighboring areas of psychology, such as social cognition, interpersonal behavior, perspective taking, communication, relationship functioning, and practical intelligence. And that creates another problem. Where does social intelligence end and emotional intelligence begin? Where does it overlap with personality? Where does it overlap with social skills? Where does it overlap with empathy? Where does it overlap with moral reasoning? These questions are still being debated. There have been attempts to measure it. One particularly important development came from David Silvera, Monica Martinesson, and Tove Dehel at the University of Troms. In 2001, they developed the Troms Social Intelligence Scale, SIS. Their research is particularly important because they recognized the difficulty of defining social intelligence and attempted to create a multidimensional instrument. The resulting scale contained 21 items across 3 factors: social information processing, social skills, and social awareness. The researchers conducted studies to develop and examine the stability of the measure. This is important evidence that the scientific world has not ignored social intelligence. It has been studied. It has been conceptualized. It has been measured. But we still do not have the equivalent of a universally accepted global system where we can confidently say, this is a person's social intelligence score, measured according to one internationally accepted standard. And that is the gap that deserves serious attention. But here I want to raise a slightly different question. Some people argue social intelligence cannot be standardized because societies are different. And there is certainly truth in that. Social customs differ. Languages differ. Family structures differ. Religious practices differ. Ideas about authority, privacy, individual freedom, hierarchy, and communication differ. What is considered appropriate behavior in one culture may not be considered appropriate in another. But does that mean that everything about social intelligence is culturally relative? I don't think so. Consider soil. The quality of soil differs enormously from one geographical location to another. Its composition differs. Its fertility differs. Its moisture differs. But there are still fundamental characteristics of soil that make it possible for life to grow. Similarly, societies may differ enormously in their customs and structures. But perhaps beneath these differences lie certain fundamental requirements of human coexistence. We know it from following questions. Can people communicate? Can they cooperate? Can they understand consequences? Can they resolve disagreements? Can they respect legitimate differences? Can they recognize the rights of others? Can they take responsibility for their behavior? Can they restrain destructive impulses? Can they distinguish between disagreement and hostility? Can they build trust? Can they contribute to the stability of the group? These questions are remarkably universal. And perhaps this is where the next generation of social intelligence research should begin. Let us also see the journey from cultural rules to universal social principles. I am not suggesting that we create one test that ignores culture. Quite the opposite. We should perhaps create a framework with 2 layers. Layer 1. Universal social competencies. The fundamental abilities necessary for human beings to live together peacefully and productively. Layer 2. Cultural expression. The way those competencies are expressed within a particular society, community, age group, and historical period. This would allow us to distinguish between the principle and the cultural expression of that principle. For example, respectful communication may be universal. But what constitutes respectful communication can vary across cultures. That distinction could make the scientific measurement of social intelligence much more meaningful. And this becomes even more important today. The world is changing at extraordinary speed. Science has reduced geographical barriers. Technology has reduced communication barriers. Social media has reduced information barriers. Countries, communities, and individuals are becoming increasingly interconnected. A person can influence thousands or millions of people without ever meeting them. A socially immature individual with enormous technological reach can potentially create enormous social consequences. So perhaps the question is no longer, is this person intelligent? Perhaps we should also ask, what does this person do with his intelligence when other human beings are involved? That is a very different question. Imagine if social intelligence were systematically studied from childhood. A child could gradually learn how to listen, how to disagree, how to cooperate, how to understand another person's perspective, how to manage group conflict, how to recognize manipulation, how to distinguish information from misinformation, how to take responsibility, how to respect diversity without losing one's own identity, how to contribute to a community, and, importantly, how one's individual choices affect the larger social system. Then, as the person grows older, social intelligence could become part of leadership development. Not merely, how intelligent is this person? But also, how responsibly does this person use his intelligence in relation to other human beings? Here some people may ask, should social intelligence be considered for leadership? This is where my question becomes even more serious. If someone is being entrusted with enormous responsibility, whether in education, business, administration, public leadership, healthcare, or any other field, should we evaluate only academic qualifications and professional competence? Or should we also understand the person's ability to understand people, handle conflict, communicate responsibly, recognize consequences, and maintain social trust? I am not suggesting that an existing social intelligence test should immediately be used to decide who deserves a position. The science is not yet mature enough for such a sweeping application. But perhaps we should begin the research necessary to make such assessment scientifically defensible. And this is where I believe we need a new beginning. We need systematic documentation. We need psychologists, sociologists, educators, neuroscientists, behavioral scientists, and other researchers to work together. We need to clearly define what is social intelligence. What are its fundamental components? Which components are universal? Which are culturally dependent? How does social intelligence develop? Can it be trained? Can it be improved? How should it be measured? Can behavior-based assessment be combined with self-report? Can situational judgment tests provide better evidence? Can longitudinal studies tell us whether social intelligence predicts healthier relationships, better leadership, stronger communities, and more constructive social participation? And finally, can we develop a scientifically robust framework that can be adapted across cultures without losing its fundamental meaning? Perhaps this is the next great frontier of intelligence research. We have spent enormous effort understanding the intelligent individual. Now perhaps we need to understand the intelligent human being in society. Because an intelligent individual can solve a difficult problem. But a socially intelligent individual asks, what will my solution do to everyone around me? An emotionally intelligent individual asks, what is happening within me, and can I manage it? And perhaps the truly mature human being learns to ask all three questions together. Can I understand? Can I manage myself? Can I live responsibly with others? The world does not just need knowledgeable people. It needs people who can use knowledge without destroying relationships, communities, and social stability. Therefore, perhaps time has come for psychology and social science to move from merely discussing social intelligence to systematically documenting it, researching it, measuring it, and teaching it. Because if the world is becoming one increasingly interconnected human community, then developing social intelligence may no longer be an optional skill. It may become one of the fundamental requirements for the survival and progress of humanity. And perhaps this is the research question we should begin asking seriously. If IQ helped us understand how intelligently a person thinks, and EQ helped us understand how intelligently a person handles emotions, shouldn't we also develop a scientifically rigorous way to understand how intelligently a person lives with the rest of humanity? That, to me, is the real challenge before the next generation of psychologists, educators, and social scientists. Thanks for viewing this video. This is Dr. Rekha Kale, your Mind and Success mentor, leading you to the enquiry for building a healthy, happy, and peaceful society for all of us to live in happily.